Probably the most famous picture of the Vietnam War was a Pulitzer Prize-winning photo of a 9-year-old girl, naked, horribly burned, running from a napalm attack. In June of 1996, the man who was responsible for the attack, who is now a pastor, learned that the girl, Phan Thi Kim Phuc, had survived and would be speaking at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. John went to the event and was able to get word to her that he was there. She agreed to see him. When they met, she embraced him and said, "It's all right, it's all right. I forgive, I forgive." You might be asking how she could possibly forgive him for such pain and suffering. Perhaps there are offenses that you believe are beyond your power to forgive. Welcome to Journey. Today, my topic is the power of forgiveness, so stay tuned. It could be the most important 30 minutes of your life. Hello, welcome to Journey. How could this young Vietnamese woman forgive the man who had caused all of her suffering, for all of the pain, both physical and emotional, that she had endured? Well, you see, she had become a Christian in 1982. And over time, she had learned the power and the freedom of forgiveness. Now, there are others who have risen above the terrible offenses that were committed against them. People who have gone against the grain of human nature and been able to forgive those who have caused them horrible pain. Corrie ten Boom was placed with her sister in a concentration camp, and her family was killed during the Nazi occupation of Holland. And deep in the hell of that kind of day-to-day existence, Corrie ten Boom watched her sister die a slow, agonizing death. But you know, Corrie survived. And not only did she survive, but she came through it with her faith not only intact, but even stronger. Years later, at a meeting where Corrie was speaking, she came face to face with a German guard who was among those responsible for that kind of inhumane treatment to she and her sister. And you know, she forgave him. Corrie ten Boom was a remarkable person, and just being around her was an incredible experience. I had the opportunity over the years to know Corrie and had the opportunity on a number of different occasions to be with her, in fact, interviewed her in our studios. I always enjoyed the opportunity to be around Corrie ten Boom because there was an aura of peace that seemed to surround her. There was a sense of inner strength that drew you to her. There was a certain magnetism about her, not just in her charismatic personality, but something about that sense of peace, gentleness, that drew you to her. There were no lines of bitterness. There was no hate etched on her face, just gentleness. And you know, it came from that peace that came as a result of having dealt with all of those horrors of the past. Corrie ten Boom knew the power of forgiveness. But you know, not everyone has learned that remarkable power, the power of forgiveness. In fact, perhaps you, watching this program today, have never really experienced the freedom that forgiveness can bring to your life. I've known people and know people today that have never been able to get past a rejection of the past, never been able to get past some kind of hurt that someone has caused them. And part of the reason for that is because there's something in us that cries out for revenge, something that screams for vindication of a wrong, what we would describe as justice. There's a certain sense of carnal satisfaction in knowing that the person who has committed that wrong is suffering at least as much as we are. Clint Eastwood and some others had built their acting career on satisfying that need in all of us for vindication. We fantasize about getting even, but you know, Clint, at least on screen, actually does it. And we love it, and we crowd the theaters to see him do it. Clint makes the bad guys pay for their meanness. And that's why other actors like Clint, Sylvester Stallone, for example, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, are so popular. It's not that they're necessarily great actors, but what they do is touch a carnal nerve in all of us, that nerve that screams out for revenge and vindication. In essence, they give the bad guys what they deserve. Now, of course, in real life, rarely ever happens like that. The bad guys don't always get their comeuppance. In fact, we can go through life and see people who seem to be pretty successful, who may have hurt us pretty deeply, and while we want them to suffer, it may not appear, at least with what we see, that they're suffering at all. In fact, it may be that they look like they're getting along very well. We've all had situations like that. And when that happens, we struggle with it. And if we're not careful, it will lead to bitterness and a deep-seated anger that robs us of any potential happiness. Have you ever noticed that Clint, Sylvester, and Arnold don't smile a lot in the movies? Angry people don't smile. And if they do, it really turns out to be more of a smirk after they've knocked off 3 or 4 other people. Usually they're sullen and angry. I don't think that they would be very fun guys to hang around with. I know some people who live with bitterness, and I can tell you that usually they're really not very fun people to hang around with. They're mad, and you really want to be careful not to make them any madder. That's what lust for revenge tends to do for us. It creates a deep down kind of anger, and pretty soon it gets to you. It gets in your spirit, and it really makes you a miserable person. The point is, lack of forgiveness reaps a bitter harvest. It's not hard for a seed of bitterness to take root in our lives and rob us of any potential for genuine happiness. Bitterness can become a cruel taskmaster. And when it controls us, it chains us to that offense, and then it holds us in that kind of bondage. We all know people that are defined by their bitterness. And it came about because of some kind of offense, some kind of thing that happened in their life that they've never been able to get past. I've talked to people like that. And it's amazing how many of those people say to me, I would like to get past it, but I don't have the ability to forgive. I've been hurt, and there's nothing that I can do about that. And the deeper they get into that bitterness, and the deeper they get into the anger, the more difficult it seems that it is to get out of it, until finally it becomes a part of their life. It becomes a tragic part of their life, because you can see it in their face, you can see the hurt, you can see the anger, and it spreads to everybody around them, because when a person is angry and they're miserable themselves, it's not hard to make other people miserable around them, does it? But let me ask you a question. Does it really have to be that way? Is it possible for people to get beyond the hurts of the past? Is there really an answer? I know that there's some of you watching the program today that would say, for me, it isn't. There's no way I can get past it. In fact, you may, if we had the opportunity to sit and talk, you may say, Jerry, I've tried it. I've tried to get past this, but I can't, because that person is still there. And every time I see them, it rises up in me. I can't get past the hurts and the rejection that's been committed against me. Is there really an answer? Well, yes, there is. And during this program today, I want to help you discover how to get past it. And we'll do that right after this, so stay tuned.
TLN is a donor-supported station, and programs like you just watched are made possible by viewers like you. To donate, please go to tln.com/donate or call us at 630-801-3857.
Hello, welcome back to Journey. You know, the human condition calls for vengeance and certainly doesn't scream out for forgiveness. But God tells us that vengeance belongs to Him. Let's take a look at the biblical context of forgiveness and see how our relationship with Christ can free us from the ravages of the lack of forgiveness. The Old Testament story of Joseph is a model of genuine forgiveness. if anyone had a reason to be bitter and to want vengeance, it had to be Joseph. Think about it. His brothers had rejected him, then they kidnapped him, then they sold him into slavery, and then they told their parents then that an animal had killed and eaten him. Now, I don't have to tell you, those are pretty serious offenses. And most of us would consider that unforgivable, that our bitterness and our hatred and anything that we could do to get back at them would be justified. And that wasn't the only problem that Joseph went through. He was betrayed by some other people, but he never let it get into his spirit. He never allowed himself to be held in the bondage to those past offenses. Later, when he became the chief administrator of the Egyptian empire, answering directly to Pharaoh, he had the power to reap horrible vengeance on his brothers. But instead, he forgave them and blessed them. He refused to live in the hurt of past offenses. And you know, that was his strength, not his weakness. In fact, I believe if he had spent his life trying to get even with his brothers and all those others that had wronged him, you can be pretty sure that he never would have risen to such a powerful position in the Egyptian empire. It's important to understand, and I want you to listen carefully to this because this has great meaning to you. Joseph didn't become a victim of his offenses. Instead, the offenses of the past became stepping stones to his greatness. There are some things we need to know about forgiveness. First of all, forgiveness is a characteristic of the Christian life. Listen to what the Bible has to say about it. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for the good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Now, this command goes against the grain of our carnal nature, doesn't it? Especially doing good for those that hurt us, doing something positive, or giving food or help to those who have caused us big harm. But in our relationship with Christ, forgiveness should not be extraordinary, it should be ordinary. In fact, Christ tells us to do good things to those who do bad things to us. Now, again, it goes against a grain of our human nature. If we love others the way Christ loves us, then we can forgive, because as we experience and understand God's grace and forgiveness in our lives, then it becomes easier for us to get past our own offenses and pass His grace on to others. What is grace? Well, it's undeserved favor. It's undeserved merit. We don't deserve God's forgiveness, but you know, He gave it to us anyway. Why did He do that? Well, because He loves us. And through the power of His forgiveness, we can forgive others, just as He forgave us. By forgiving, we're not excusing misdeeds. And you know, the misdeeds don't go away, because the things that are done, whether they're good or bad. We're recognizing the offense, but then we're making a decision, we're making a choice. We're choosing to forgive it, and then we're moving on to more important things in our lives. Sin, very important to understand this, sin cannot be undone, it can only be forgiven. One of the things we need to understand is that forgiveness is contrary to the pattern of the world. In a world of litigation that we live in, sometimes forgiveness almost seems undesirable. Everybody cheers the hero when he gets even. It seems practically to be the American way. But you know, deep down, we really do want to forgive, and we really do want to be forgiven. I interviewed a man a few months ago whose child had been murdered. The killer was on death row. And you would think that the man would cheer the fact that the man was going to be put to death and he was going to get his justice. But the man had come to the place, as hard as it may be for some of us to understand, that he could forgive the killer. And he did not desire that the killer be put to death. In fact, he said that won't solve the problem. He said the problem, especially the problem of forgiveness, he said, is in me. There are a couple of other things we need to understand about forgiveness. It's essential to our emotional well-being. Why do you think the Apostle Paul in Romans tells us to forgive our enemies? Well, first of all, it's what Jesus taught us. But there's another reason. Also, forgiveness can break the cycle of retaliation and can lead to mutual reconciliation. It's hard to fight someone who doesn't fight back. It gives the other person an opportunity to reconcile. A good example was in a movie that I enjoyed. If you've seen it, I'm sure you enjoyed it, called Joe Somebody. Joe came to the conclusion, took him a while, but he came to the conclusion that he was bigger than the offense. And after going through all of the karate lessons and becoming a fighter, he came to the conclusion that he didn't need to prove himself by fighting the bully that had caused him such an offense. And you know what? It turned out that the bully didn't want the fight either. And that Joe's refusal to fight gave the bully an opportunity to reconcile. In a very real sense, Joe won the greater battle. He won the battle over himself, because returning evil for evil usually hurts you more than it hurts the enemy. So forgiveness is as much about you as it is the other person. By forgiving, you become a stronger person, and you have the opportunity to get on about your life and, again, do some things that are more important than worrying about past offenses. Now, what are some practical things we can do to develop a forgiving attitude? Well, we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned.
TLN is a donor-supported station, and programs like you just watched are made possible by viewers like you. To donate, please go to tln.com/donate or call us at 630-801-3857.
Hello, welcome back to Journey. By the way, I hope that you're enjoying the lesson and you're getting something out of it. And I've said this before, but I'd like to remind you again, if you would like to take some notes, make sure you do that. Just get a pen and paper and jot down some things that are important to you. And also there are some ways that you can get transcripts of the lesson. You'll find out that later. What are some practical things that we can do to develop a forgiving attitude? Well, first of all, we start with the awareness that forgiveness is an act of the will. So don't say you can't forgive. You can forgive, especially when you ask for God's help. So what does it involve? Well, it involves both commitment and action. So first of all, we commit to forgiveness. We begin by praying and asking God to help us to forgive, to help us do something that has been very difficult for us to do on our own. Then, in your own mind, you commit yourself to forgiving the person. Now, it's important that you understand you don't just forgive once and expect it to be done. You keep on forgiving. Every time the anger, every time the bitterness tends to rise up in your spirit, you forgive again. And then you forgive again and again and again until finally it becomes a pattern, the pattern of forgiveness. Then, we take action to forgive. One of the first things that's important for us is to verbalize it. To say to yourself and to someone else, I have forgiven that person. But then also, let the person know that you've forgiven them. A couple of things I would recommend. Maybe write them a letter. Call them. Maybe send them an email. There's something very important that you need to know at this point. Don't expect anything back in return. You say, well, wait a minute. If I forgive, then I'm supposed to get something back in return. That person is supposed to accept that. We want that person to be gratified and happy that we've forgiven them. But you know what? They may not respond positively. But you know, that's not your problem. It's their problem. Because this is not about that person doing the right thing. It's about you doing the right thing and begin to set into motions dynamics that can help that person, maybe over time, to do the right thing. Because they have to finally decide how they're going to handle your act of forgiveness. So it's really important that you don't get your feelings hurt again and you get back into more bitterness because you've asked forgiveness and they didn't forgive. Now you're hurt and angry and feel rejected again because they didn't act the way that you think they should. They may not respond the way you think they should. But here's something else that's important. Start praying for them. You know, it's absolutely amazing what happens when you begin to pray for a person, because you have really brought that person into an important place in your life. And praying for a person on a daily basis over time will begin to change your attitude toward them. Now, when you first start praying for them, it may be kind of difficult, especially if they have, in one way or another, caused you some pretty serious harm. But when you do that, remember, it is, in fact, the scriptural thing to do. Remember the scripture we talked about. Bless them who despitefully use you. Do good things to them who even persecute you. As we begin to pray for a person, it gets harder and harder to wish bad things on them because you're praying for them. You're bringing them before God. The commitment that you have made and the actions that you're taking will begin to lead you to a forgiving attitude. And you know what? A forgiving attitude will lead to an emotional freedom that's really hard to describe. It's rare that a person who holds a grudge holds just one grudge, because holding grudges is an attitude. And if you've got it in your spirit, you probably have a collection, a sizable collection of grudges that you're harboring. I'm immediately thinking about someone that I know in the past and who really was a master. They were genius at holding grudges, and they could nurture them. And every time you talk to them, they wanted to talk about a grudge. They wanted to talk about somebody who had caused them some kind of harm. They had reached a point in their lives where they got a certain sense of satisfaction about being a victim and to be able to talk about their victimization. But by developing a forgiving attitude, you're able to get rid of that kind of emotional garbage, because it's that garbage that is corrupting your spirit. Right actions lead to right attitudes. Here's something else important. Real forgiveness does not keep track of offenses. After the Civil War, General Robert E. Lee visited a wealthy woman whose estate was badly damaged during the war. She took General Lee to the remains of a great oak tree that had really showcased this beautiful plantation. The Union forces had destroyed the tree. And after a few bitter complaints, she paused and she looked to General Robert E. Lee to join her in her complaints and her bitterness of the Union Army. After a few moments of silence, General Lee said to the woman, "Cut it down, my dear madam, and forget it." Good advice. It is so important that we break with the past, that we learn to forgive and move on. In other words, cut it down and forget it. Move on, get past it. The ancient rabbis taught that people should forgive those who offended them, but only 3 times. Peter asked Jesus if 7 was the number. You know what Jesus said? 70 times 7. In other words, we should keep on forgetting. Now that doesn't mean that we should keep letting people hurt us. If someone, for example, has proven not to be honest in their business dealings, I can forgive them. But common sense tells me that it probably is not a good idea to continue to do business with them until they get their lives together. If you're in an abusive relationship, forgiving does not mean that you should just keep letting that person abuse you. Again, common sense obviously should prevail in these kinds of situations. Now, let's review. First of all, it's the right thing to do. God has commanded it. Also, it contributes to our emotional well-being. It can help the other person. It's a reflection of the likeness of Christ in our own lives. So cut down the tree of bitterness. Move on. I hope this lesson will be helpful to you as you move from the bondage of bitterness to freedom, of forgiveness, and to be instrumental, as you learn this, in helping someone else discover that the kind of freedom for their lives is the kind of freedom that brings them tremendous joy and fulfillments. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time as we continue our journey.
If you enjoyed today's message, we'd love to hear your comments. Please send your letters to Journey, in care of TLN, 2880 Vision Court, Aurora, Illinois, 60506.
Thank you for watching. The program you just watched is made possible by viewers like you. We would like to thank you for your continued support. To donate, please go to tln.com/donate or call us at 630-801-3857.